Welcome to the Channel Tribe. In this session of Fireside Chat by the Test Tribe, we are having Paramjit Singh Aujla discussing on testing practices in Agile.
I welcome you all once again to this Fireside Chat with Paramjit Singh Aujla, who is a Vice President and Head of Testing and Support Operations at Edelweiss, Tokio. And the theme for the session today is testing practices in Agile. And I would like to thank our annual sponsors, BrowserStack, and our premium sponsor for conferences, BrowserStack, for this continuous support and patronage. As I mentioned, Paramjit is a Vice President and Head of Testing and Support Operations at Edelweiss Tokyo Life Insurance. He has more than 19 years of experience implementing digital and agile transformation initiatives. He is a results-oriented IT engineer and a people-centric leader. He has demonstrated track record of success in software development, testing, and application support across multiple domains, which include airlines, payment systems, insurance, and a bunch of others. He has extensive experience in agile delivery management, program management, quality engineering, test automation. He holds a lot of agile certifications, and that's why we have kept the theme for this session today as testing practices in agile. And I think he's the go-to person for all questions on this. So one of the pointers which we had given for this event was a test first approach. And what, in your opinions, are the benefits of a test first approach, and what benefit it can bring to the entire development life cycle and to the entire org in that respect?
Okay, so we need to first understand the objectives behind such initiatives. When we say test first, test early, or test often, these are certain keywords which float in
Yeah.
the market, and people generally tend to just start practicing them. But overall, the objective behind such initiatives is to bring in the quality which is built into the product. So test first is related to the when we are starting the development, we need to bring in the approach where developers write their tests along with the code. So even before they write really a line of code, they start writing their test, and when the test fails, they bring in the code which can actually make the test pass, and finally we run the test again and it passes again. So you are actually, for every line of code or the certain collection of lines of code, you have a test, right? And overall, when the feature is ready, it comes uh, with a set of tests which you can automate, which you can put in the CI/CD. And when it comes to the testers, they already have a set of results they can look into.
Correct.
When we have, when they start their functional validation, what the main advantage of doing test first is, you you will have lesser logic, you will have lesser logical errors, because you're covering the permutations and combinations of the different code, how it is computing the different outputs, and all of that you're covering as part of your unit test which you are writing within the code, right? So the testers can actually just focus on the workflows which are they can accomplish from the UI, and they can actually validate the functionality from the UI, and make sure that at the whole integrated system, it is working together, the components are working together, and as a system it is meeting the objectives, right?
Got it.
So there are multiple things. Once you have the test cases ready as part of your code, you can actually put them in the CI/CD, as I said, and it becomes part of they grow as the sprint by sprint, or the whatever process which you're following. The test cases grow and they eventually get into a repository. Your DevOps pipeline automatically picks those test cases, and they keep on running with every release. And whenever we encounter any issue, it is easy to debug those areas, because you are not going to find where the problem is. You will be pointed because of those test cases which are built into the code. So your cost of finding the defect is low.
Low.
I can't show you visually, but when we file a defect or when we encounter a defect, the defect which is found in the design stage is the most cheapest defect. What we find in the next stage, when we are test developers are developing the code, it is still very cheap to find that defect and fix the defect. But when we actually take it to the tester and when we actually take it to the production, cost of fixing that defect rises as big as 15x, because you are going to take down the production replica of the things back to your
Yeah.
UAT. You are going to fix the entire thing. You don't have right code to debug it, so it takes a lot of money to fix the
Yeah.
same defects. So the
Correct.
only objective behind introducing such practices is you lower down the cost of quality, right?
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that at least then testers get a more matured product, at least a slightly more matured product when they start to test, and they can focus on the higher order things in that respect. Right?
Yes, yes. I hope
There is a
this.
question from Madhu. Yeah, there is a question from there is a related question from Madhu which I'm showing on stage. Is there anyone who reviews the unit test cases of a developer, or are there any golden standards for unit test cases?
See, this is based upon how that particular organization is following the practices. As a tester, you are looking at it from the third eye, but
Correct.
as a development team, as a whole development team, we are one team. What engineering practices we are going to follow, it depends on team to team. Some teams actually, who are good on the budget, they can introduce pair programming. And some teams have a peer reviewer for each line, each feature or whatever we are developing as a code module. So we can introduce engineering practices based upon what is followed in our organization, and
Hmm.
we can always try to suggest what works well. Because when we say peer programming, right, organization often look at it, oh, this is a very expensive exercise,
Yeah.
because for one piece of code I am putting two developers, right? So it is the first reaction you will get from the people who are passing your budget, and it never passes, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So the problem is, when you get into such meetings, you need to make sure that you have the right data to convince them the right valuable product which you are going to get out of that after following those engineering practices. When two people are sitting together, one is actually writing the code and one is looking over the shoulder looking at
Correct.
that code, then the person who was looking at the code, then he or she will write the code, and the person who was writing the code first, now he becomes a
Yeah.
reviewer. So they both are
Correct.
writing the code, but together, and that actually lowers down the defect count. And again, we need to look at the cost of quality.
Cost of quality. Yeah.
So we don't really look after 1 year that, okay, if the bug is introduced, it might just cost $20,000 to fix that bug. We want to save money now or we want to save money later, it's in our hands.
Later. Got it. Got it. Interesting. This is quite an interesting perspective in terms of all this, and I think that's a very Achilles heel kind of a problem. That how to get the budget passed for all of this is is a tricky thing, right? Which is fair. Cool. I'll move to the next question because we have a bunch of a lot of questions which we have collected right now also, and okay. Uh, this is about again testing practices in agile. Why is the BDD approach not easily adopted by product owners or business analysts for test automation? We haven't seen too many success stories. What could be the issue in your understanding about this?
Because you are asking them to work extra. On a candid note, the problem is, you are expecting the BA or product owner, whoever is playing that role, you're asking them to create acceptance tests for you, and
Correct.
then from those scenarios you're actually going to derive your test cases. So you're
Correct.
asking them to work extra for you, and
Correct.
no one wants to wear the hat, because it gets them into a tricky situation, because they become liable for coverage of the particular functionality. And um, so it is actually adding extra work for them, right? So what they're asking is, we give you the user stories or whatever format of requirements we have. You want to use BDD automation framework, whatever type of automation framework you'd like to use. You create your acceptance test cases or test scenarios, whatever you want to create. We will just review it, the Gherkin or
Oh,
whatever interface which we are
yeah.
using. We will just review them and we'll give you hand thumbs up. So this is all about, I think, the extra effort everyone wants to avoid. There is no nothing like they it's all about how they want to gel up with the team, what kind of understanding they have, and third, what kind of bandwidth they have.
Department they have. Yeah.
So maybe they are neck deep into the things, and then you
Things,
are
yeah.
asking them, "Can you write me acceptance test?" He's like, "No, sorry."
No, no, sorry. Yeah. I my hands
So
full.
I don't have any technical answer for this, because this is more a team problem. I
Correct.
think this is more a objective problem from the management point of view. On a strategic note, if the organization feels that they want to drive the test scenarios or the acceptance test through BAs, they need to start from the top down. They need to start that
Yeah.
process.
Correct.
Once the BAs understood that this is coming from the top, and we need to understand that this is a set process, no one would say no, right? But if we are making if we our processes are confusing people, there are no laid guidelines, they will eventually come down to testers,
Testers. Yeah.
right?
It's true.
And unfortunately, you're right that you know I have not seen many BAs writing the acceptance test for us.
Acceptance criteria. Yeah.
Most of the cases, automation people or the functional testers,
Functional
whoever,
QA. Yeah.
whatever hat we want to wear, we are writing
Mm,
them. So
got it.
yeah.
Yeah, this is a tricky affair. Again, it boils down to culture, to the
Yes.
extra cost which we have to pay. So I think it boils down to a lot of other things also. A which is a fair understanding in that respect. Okay. Now this is a very common question, and this is I think one of the most important pain points for people in general also. Is in sprint automation easily achievable, and what mindset or a cultural shift or tips you can advise for making this work in my team, let's say.
Yep. um I think 7 8 years back, when I was working in pre-sales, this used to be a hot cake which we used to sell into different clients. I will see, my responses will always be very candid and real.
No
So
worries, which is important.
there are two things when we are looking at test automation. One is, we are working with a product team, we are building a new product, right? It's a different situation. You are working on a current set of features. You have a backlog which you have to test. As a tester team, you have to test it. So you have to functionally validate it. Now you want to utilize by just manually going through different test scenarios and all of that, or you want to adopt a new approach where you functionally validate that, and in parallel to that, you're also writing your acceptance test cases, which
Yes.
eventually, there is always certain gaps which when the testers are actually waiting for the first build, or let's say it is a 2 week sprint. Generally in the first few days or 3 4 days, you don't get much to test, and
Yeah.
you can always utilize that time to understand the user stories, write your acceptance test cases, and to make things success from the technology point of view. Let me give you one example. Okay, people can relate to it who are doing automation. So let's assume that we are talking about web automation here. Okay, to make things successful, how we can introduce, and this is how we did actually. Okay, this is a case study. So what we did was, we asked for the wireframes in advance. Okay, whenever we used to start a sprint, we had the wireframes already with us.
Okay.
Okay. So what in the first few days, our testing team used to do was we used to, at least capture those workflows in our automated test scenarios, you know, and once the first build is ready, the first feature is coming in, there used to be slight changes in terms of the actual object sometimes, because wireframe is wireframe, it's not carrying the actual object, or it's not carrying the
Correct.
dynamic functionality. So
Correct.
those changes we used to do in the week two, but week one we have our we acceptance test cases ready. We already have, created the workflows in automation. The only thing which gets updated in week two is the object repository, and
Correct.
the test data part is already there. Everything is there. We just,
Correct.
need to update our objects. It is slightly some redundant effort on the from the objects point of view, but it at least gives you a flavor of, doing things within the sprint. And
Correct.
while you are, writing those acceptance test cases, you can, you can do two things. You are When you're writing Gherkin language, GWT format, whatever you want to use, you are actually writing those test cases, and you can validate those test cases while you're writing them, right?
Correct.
And once your automation is ready in the week one, and when week two you are actually running them, you are actually, validating your functionality through automation.
True.
You may be validating the some of the functionality that it is ready for automation, you know through, just a manual exploratory view of it. But once that is there, and you know that this feature is ready and it looks ready for the automation, you just run your automation, which was
Got it.
made using the wireframes. So that is
Wireframes.
one way of doing it. So for everything, for general specifically for the UI, I'm saying, you can always ask for the frames, and you can,
Frames.
get your automation bit ready. You can update it later. And for the I think for APIs which, where we have dependencies on the third party APIs, we introduce service virtualization. And
Correct.
when we know that,
Got it.
our calls will be going to different APIs which are not there now, we just create virtualization for that,
Got
and
it.
we assume that, that API is there now.
There now. Got it. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the wireframes part make a lot of sense because if you can get the wireframes early, and if you can at least write the scripts and just update the objects later, you'll still save a lot of effort, and you'll still be able to achieve some in sprint automation, if not everything. Let's say.
Yeah, I mean, this here we don't here we are not just talking about testing team. This requires a lot of discipline as a development team,
Discipline, development team.
right? The scrum master has to drive it. The product manager should know that, what the different people in my team require to make things successful.
Got it.
So where we could not, sell this cake, or where we could not achieve this thing, we always had the second coin ready, which we used to call it a lagging sprint model, right?
Got it.
This is in sprint model. There used to be a lagging sprint model. So
Yeah.
where, we used to make sure that, in the sprint one, our things are, ready, our features tested, they are in the shipping state. But in the sprint two, we are actually manually validating the sprint two, but we are automating the sprint one scope.
One. Yeah.
Okay,
Got
so
it.
you are just lagging by one sprint.
Like one sprint. Yeah.
Yeah, so generally this model used to work better,
Better.
because people used to get overwhelmed in the, same sprint using in sprint model. But it is always achievable if you have enough bandwidth in the team. If you don't, the lagging sprint model is always there for you.
Got it. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think this should help our people to at least uh, achieve a better validation of their in sprint automation. Fair
Yes.
enough. Okay, now this is again a very common question. With a huge testing backlog, how can one decide which user stories to prioritize?
See, there are a couple of things here. In the agile world, the product backlog, we need to understand as a discipline, we need to make sure that we are we are involving product owner in such exercises, because that person, he or she, they are key to prioritizing the backlog. They know that which features requires high, which are tagged as high risk areas, or which are high priority, and the product backlog is always ordered. Okay, it is
Correct.
supposed to be. I don't know,
Ideally.
what would be the state, but ideally a product backlog is always in the ordered state. And team can actually in the sprint planning meeting, they can just pick the top 5 or 6 items to start doing sprint planning. So product owner should be your first stop. Yeah. I am you reach out as a development team, not just as a tester. As a development team, all group together, you in the maybe in the daily scrum, you just raise a question. Yeah, I would like to meet everyone, and I want to visit the high risk areas, which are I can prioritize for the test automation or the overall testing. So then team can just sit together, including the product owner, that we can identify those high risk areas, and the developers can actually give you the input, right? Because when they were running remember the first question, we were doing the test early or test first
Yeah,
approach.
that's often.
When they run those test cases, you get a report out of it that the defects were mostly majorly coming out of 10, let's say in the 3 areas. They already know that those 3 or 4 areas were turning more defects into the bills. So you already have a prioritized order of the different features from the
Mhm.
developers. From the functionality point of view, see, one is severity, one is priority. So product owner knows what's product priority order is, right? So merging both of them, you will get to a situation where you can there is something called as risk based testing, right? So
Correct.
you can actually rank things as per their risk order. You can also bring in the flavor of high defect areas, and you
Correct.
can also bring in the same factual data from the developers, and then you can sit with everyone, create your backlog
Backlog.
prioritize.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It is not only a product owner's responsibility; it's a collective responsibility across all the functions which are involved in software development cycle. Makes a lot of sense. Uh, okay, so I'll move to some specific agile questions also now. Uh, okay, so what is your view on how should a tester perceive an acceptance criteria on
Mhm.
a story?
Mhm. So first of all, we need to understand what is acceptance criteria is, right? So I think as a team, there are agile teams, or there are scrum teams. The problem is we are not perceiving the importance of acceptance criteria.
Yep.
Some of the teams actually write, okay, while this thing is ready, we have performance tested this, we have functionally validated this, there are 5 checkboxes, and you say my acceptance criteria is done. That's wrong.
Yeah.
The acceptance criteria is about the feature which you have built.
Correct.
It's about the different steps it followed, and different uh, output objects which it will be providing at different stages. It has to mention that. Let's say you are, let's say you are issuing a PDF report to a user, right? So what is the functional validation here? What should be my acceptance criteria? Should I just be saying that, okay, user is able to issue a PDF report to the user? No, that's
Yeah.
just a generic statement.
Generic statement.
Be
Yeah.
more specific. We need to talk about user is provided that option. Step
Hmm.
one, and user is able to use that option and view the PDF on the screen.
Hmm.
User is provided the option to download it, right? User is provided the option for filters. I don't know. There can be a number of combinations.
Bunch of others. Yeah.
Those should be part of your acceptance criteria. Then, as a tester, when I visit that user story, I already know what are my functional checkpoints are.
Right.
And when I look at it, there should be an option for downloading a PDF file. I know that I need to derive certain positive and negative test scenarios out of it, right? Similarly, that's how the testers, there is nothing special about it. I would say that as a tester, how we need to look at it, acceptance criteria, we need to just look at it, what it is asking you to validate functionally,
Correct.
what it is trying to say, what are my checkpoints are we, in your test cases or test scenarios, whatever terminology we use, are we covering those, right? Are we having enough boundary conditions? Are we looking at the non-functional aspect of it? Are we looking at the other areas, right? So as a tester, we need to look at all the permutation and combinations, but as an acceptance criteria, it is same for developer also, it is same for tester also. There is nothing
Got
apart for testers. I
it.
hope this is what the question was.
Yeah, this is something what was the question was, and I think what makes a lot of sense is that it has to be more specific. You cannot just write a generic statement in the light of I have lesser time, or I have. It should go to testers as input for the test cases eventually. That's what a
Yes, yes.
good acceptance criteria would actually mean. We have a lot of audience questions coming, and there's a lot of pressure also coming to take questions from audience. So I'll take one in the interest of audience questions also. This might not be related to the exact theme we have, but I think with your experience and with your exposure of multiple domains, uh, you can take this one also. Uh, Facing many gaps. This is from Swapna, who is a QA data metrics. Facing many gaps in between mobile and web testing practices. How do we implement better approaches in mobile testing platform? As I've not seen anyone addressing those issues in detail in any testing platforms. So that's the question from Swapna. Is it clear enough for you to attempt
Yes,
this?
yes, yes. So in 2015, I published one of the, or I was speaker at one of the conference where I talked about what should be your mobile testing strategy should be. And mobile, when we talk about mobile platforms, it brings in all together a different flavor of testing. We're talking about a device which comes with different, and we are not talking about just one device here, we're talking about n number of devices which comes from different vendors. We need to prioritize the vendor list itself. We need to look at, and even with one vendor, there are 7 versions minus the latest version running in the market today, right? So let's say we talk about iPhone. We don't use iPhone 13 today, we are using iPhone 6 also. We have all kind of
Yeah,
users, right? So the mobile testing strategy, it itself becomes very large, because we are trying to cover both aspects of it, not just the functional validation of it. There are n number of non-functional aspects also. We need to look at it, the different UI settings it has, what pixels it is using. um, uh, are we looking at the network coverage test cases? Are we looking at the battery test cases, CPU utilization? So
yeah,
there are n number of areas which gets added to a mobile testing strategy, which are generally not there in
in
your
a web
desktop
test.
web strategy. And in this short lecture, I can talk about all these areas, but I'm happy to give a much larger you know uh,
Perspective is
speak as I can spend 1 hour on this strategy, and I can give you the entire glimpse of what people should be doing. There are cloud testing platforms available which are very handy, like Browser Stack, one of your
yeah,
sponsor here. And I used the Browser Stack many years back, like a decade back. And I used Source Labs. I have used
yeah,
plenty of them, Perfecto, and name any cloud testing platform you used it. And they are very helpful, because we can never create that kind of mobile test lab in house. The
correct.
kind of variety these people are bringing in, you can never achieve.
Never achieve. It's very
And
costly also in that respect.
your automation, when I was working with Source Lab, it is so seamless. You're just changing couple of lines of code, Rest everything is same, and so, they support everything out of the box, right? What you're running in the simple your laptop today, after changing those couple of lines of code, it starts running there, and you run on different n number of devices, right? So that's where mobile testing strategy becomes complex.
Becomes very important. Yeah, I think
I
that's
hope,
true. There is,
Swapna, that answered your question. I'm happy to connect with you on
yeah,
LinkedIn.
I think what you're saying is very right. That mobile testing is just the sheer variable number of variables which we have on mobile testing. It's just the brand, the make, the screen size, resolution, CPU
Yes.
utilization, SIM network for that matter, and so the sheer diversity of variables makes it a really tricky case to automate for mobile.
Think about an application called Paytm. We are all
Paytm,
using
yeah,
Paytm today, right? And Paytm, if you use in Gurgaon or Bangalore, it's a different situation because we have 4G running here. We
yeah,
might have 5G running here. But if
correct,
you take the same Paytm on a
okay,
roadside shop where you
correct,
barely get a 2G signal, you
correct.
need actually create conditions which give you that kind of signal. And now these platforms are actually giving you that also.
Get better
You can
characterization.
actually make that signal sound like it is a 2G signal, and
Yeah,
your application gets tested in those settings.
yeah,
That's the beauty of it, and that's the challenging part also, because it
yeah, yeah.
multiplies your test cases to
It's the same.
multiple x, not just one
Numerous
test case.
numbers.
Yes.
So I worked with a company called MediaTek. So we used to make chipsets for mobile phones. So our one of our major tests was field test. That okay, the modem should be compatible across multiple geographies. We'll travel across the world and stuff like that. So then network simulators etc. were put into place. We set up huge labs in the house, but we can avoid the cost of traveling to different countries and cities and just replicate this as much as possible in house. The combinations. I think
uh,
that kind of stuff is there.
I
Yeah.
I will just take 1 minute. I had a
Yes,
case study about one of the client. I can't name it, but yeah, it was a mobile security client, and we had to test their application. Not from the UI, right?
Mhm.
And I'm talking about the life 7 8 years back. So we barely had any major tools in the market which could help us test it from the backend, right? So what we used to do was we actually used to create Java packages and deploy it on the Android devices, run them, which actually Google provides you that utility actually. Okay, so you run those test cases using that utility, and it actually run on the Android device which where you deployed it.
God.
So
Yeah.
that's the complexity of it.
Complexity of it. That's true. I think let's move quickly to other questions. The next question which I have is this one. Just putting this on chat. Uh, which is I think the industry started with user stories, and now we are trying to find an excuse to put everything which is not user centric into let's say technical story. So the question is very candid, and I'll give the candor of this also. What's going on here is this like abuse or a or like a chalta hai attitude. Chalta hai for people from audiences like it works like this only. So
Um, I let us take a step back. You know, user story is always just a user story. So
yeah,
there is nothing called as technical user story or a functional user story. User story will always be a user story. And development teams, they often struggle to talk to product owners generally to convince them, because there are n number of challenging things they need to do at the back end, which requires enormous time of amount effort, right? With sizable effort away from their functional user stories, which we call, right, which can be described as a user action, right? So let's say there was a microservice running, okay, and because of certain things we need to change that microservice. Now that microservice is not directly interacting with any of your user validation action, right? That design change or that particular code change will require certain effort. How do I convince my product owner for that, right? So that's where teams started realizing for any non-functional changes kind of nature of things, right? Where I'm talking, let's say we are talking about performance tuning, okay? Let's say we are talking about introducing in an existing product, we are trying to introduce load balancer, right? It will require effort from everyone, development team, testing team, BAs, product owners, everyone will be working on that. How do we get that to backlog? We need to have a technical user story. That's what the history of technical story is.
Yeah.
But people start perceiving it as, when things are not working out, we have
Yeah.
lot many defects, we are trying to fit it into a large technical user story, and we are trying to create a technical story for that, which is wrong in itself, right? Which is not the ideal way of doing it. The technical user story had a thinking behind it. It is meant to do things which cannot be described in a normal user validation action. It has a context to it. Let's say you have a UI library, okay? Now you are trying to uh, upgrade it to the latest React version, okay? React libraries are used on the UI side, okay? So you need to give the context
Correct.
to the user story, sorry, technical user story. You need to also provide what value it will be bringing to the table. After I upgrade to the React library, what extra things I'll be getting, right? So that the person who is reading it, they know the value of the technical user story. Similarly, the acceptance criteria follows our previous discussion we had,
Yeah.
right? How we're going to validate all of that, right? And not just a generic statement, we have deployed it, please go and test it. No, not that. And then we also need to talk about what it will not be doing, right? What is really out of scope from this technical point of view, because things get overstretched very easily, right?
Correct. That's true.
So that's where the technical stories are. I think this is more about discipline. This is more
Discipline.
about
Yeah.
how product owners and scrum masters are running teams, and they need to work together. They need to put discipline in place, and that's what Scrum is. Scrum is all about creating self-sustainable and self-disciplined teams.
Set up discipline
They
teams.
need to learn and evolve. They will not be at best in the sprint one, but they will eventually grow organically and be best by maybe 5, 6, or 7 sprints.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. That it has to be a lot of mindset change and a cultural change from that respect. It's more of a discipline issue rather than a technical issue from that perspective.
Yes.
Got it. This last question from which I'll take from my list. There are a bunch of which are left, but I think in the interest of time and in the interest of taking more audience question, what KPIs indicate that a team has attained agility, given that they are not bound by a framework like Scrum or SAF, etc.?
I personally hate KPIs. um, you know Putting everything in a number is very, very, very hard sometimes. Let's say people ask, okay, what is automation bringing to the table, right? It becomes very challenging when we are actually developing it and showing that what it is bringing you to the table, right? Similarly, showing that how agility is, what team has attained, team has become matured enough in the agile or scrum or whatever they are following. There are no strict KPIs for that, but definitely you need to look at some of the factors, right? Are we maturing as an agile team, right? So one of the factor which we just talked about is writing a user story, writing the right acceptance criteria as a team. Do we understand what is the importance of all the scrum events? Do we understand what is the importance of meeting 15 minutes in the morning, right? Do we understand? I mean, these are very small things, but they have a lot of importance. That's
Correct.
where people fall into trap. And sprint retrospective, right? The most under utilized meeting in
Underutilized
the
meeting.
team.
That's true.
People just sit on the table and they start looking at each other. Who will speak first, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And the scrum master is seen around, taking a stick in hand, finding the developers who had the most defects. Very, very wrong.
Yeah.
That's not what sprint retrospective is. Similarly, we need to understand there are other events, and then those are the indicators. They are not numbers, they are indicators, right? And scrum is empirical in nature. If you, as a framework, is empirical, right?
Paramjit, are you there? I think we lost you. Are you there, Paramjit? I think we lost you. Uh, yeah, we can see you now, but the screen is like a half screen right now. Is it like a mobile orientation problem, or is it like what?
No, it's my desktop. Yeah, one second.
Just wait. Okay, still the same. I think it's still the same. I don't know why this might be an air meet bug.
We can ask the audience, are they seeing me okay?
Just wait. Can you switch on your speaker audio video again? Okay. So is it like are you able to see Paramjit full screen or is it like half screen?
They are
Okay. Only
fine.
I think it's only my problem then. Okay. So
Ashutosh, it was you.
no problem. No problem. I'll manage. Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about the, then, we are talking about as a team, there are certain engineering practices also which gets introduced as part of organization process, also as part of, what scrum master is trying to do or product owners are trying to do, right? As a team development team, what we think are the right engineering practices. And it's easy that people want, just to, outgrow each other, they wander into, okay, let me go and see React 5 without even talking to the other team members, right? So such things happen, but that is opposite of what a scrum team should be, right? You are mute if you're saying something.
Yeah. So I think that's the opposite of what Scrum Team should be. Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to create a team which is, the where communication is the of prime importance. They
Hmm.
talk to each other, they take a decision as a team. There are not individual, journeys. It is always a team journey.
Team journey.
Once you start, seeing valuable products coming out of your team, let me give you the best KPI. Once you see that after certain iterations, not the first iteration itself, after
Of
certain
course.
iterations of the sprints or whatever you want to call it, there is a discipline in the team, and the output which is expected, the valuable shippable product, the product which we are expecting after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks of sprint, we are getting, and it is sustainable now. That's the best KPI for you, where
Correct.
team has achieved that agility,
Agility.
right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
not,
Makes a lot of sense.
they will be doing something else.
Correct. I think it makes a lot of sense. So that's a it cannot be put into numbers, but it can be put into indicators. Like you rightly mentioned, that we have to find indicators of people understanding the value of
I mean,
Scrum.
if some, leadership person comes and ask me, Param, can you bring some numbers, KPIs? I will go back with some numbers.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
are they going to do anything good? They will be green. I'm telling you, they will always be green.
The list green. Yeah,
But
that's also
they're
true.
doing justice? No. We need to wait.
Got it.
The Scrum is an open framework. It talks about self growth. The team has to grow as one team. They need to trust each other. They need to, the three pillars of it, they need to follow it religiously. And then you will see the agility has been attained.
Got it. Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense again. Now, I think from my list, I'll pause it here because we have 10 minutes left and we have quite a few audience questions. Let's try to take as many as possible. This, I think, we have answered in parts, but if you can quickly give a recap or add on something extra. This is from Avi, who is a manager at Medidata, New York, United States. What testing practices helps bring testing early in development? So, if the question is clear
Okay.
enough and attempt this quickly,
So,
yeah.
um, as a tester, when we say test early, it always mostly points to bringing in TDD like approaches in the
Hmm.
development phase, where test developers become involved and they create their unit tests as part of code. But as testers, we in agile teams, we get involved where we are refining the product backlog. We work with the
Correct.
product owners, we understand the requirements, we help them set right acceptance criterias. We that product backlog PB, there are meetings, PBR meetings we call it. So those
Correct.
meetings, they we get a groomed backlog out of it. Once we are actually in the sprint planning meeting, we already have things in right shape. From technology point of view, we need to bring in sprint model, we need to bring in service virtualization, we need to
So,
bring in tools which can help us to exploratory testing, which can help you, there are AI based tools now which can actually capture what you're doing on the screen and which can yield you test cases just as you are just exploring a
writing
website,
them.
right?
Yeah.
You don't really need to write 10,000 line Excel for that. They can actually give you that, all of that in one shot. So and bring in automation as much possible in the early stage, because as the product grows, your automation grows. Eventually, your regression is partly, it is never fully, it is partly 60%, 65%, whatever number you are trying to achieve, it gets automated, and it will actually cover the permutation and combinations of different devices. There are many devices in the market. Most of the applications which we are building, they are made to run on iPads of the world, and
Correct.
our desktops, our laptops. There are different screen sizes and all, so we can never test them manually. So we need to bring in automation early in the cycle, so that
Correct.
once our product grows, we have a sizable automation suite in place. And then once that automation is running, we are actually spending our focus on exploring the product, trying to find defects where high risk areas are. So our functional testing team becomes more focused, instead of looking at a series of steps and validating on the screen. They actually just explore the entire product and look for the defects as a user. It's kind
Got
of
it. Got it.
bringing in UAT early in the cycle,
Correct.
and your testers become a user, and you start doing things. And where the automation, it's not just running 8 hours a day, it actually can run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And once you're back on Monday, you have already a suite which was running for last Saturday, Sunday, 48 hours. So that's the beauty of it. I hope that
Correct.
answered your question.
Yeah, I think that was a good descriptive answer. We have about 5 minutes left. I'll take one more. This is from Rajesh. How do you approach testing for R&D project when there are no clear scope defined? As we would be discovering what can be accomplished. I think he's trying to say that we would be exploring it on the go. How do you approach testing for such kind of a project?
I don't know what is the nature of this R&D project is. Lot
Okay.
depends on what we're doing. I would assume that they are trying to build a product and they are trying to research that product first, and then if that research becomes successful, probably they will go for a market product. I hope that's the, you can just say yes or no, whoever it
Is
is.
Rajesh here? Is Rajesh here? Can you put in if that is what you mean on chat? I think he might have left in between. That's okay.
So
Yeah.
let's assume that they are trying to build a beta product, right? It's a research, it is going to be the research output. And They're trying to, I am just trying to think what he's asking for. So
Okay.
he's trying to ask for a test approach when we don't have much requirements in place, right?
Yeah.
So that's a common problem I think we used to face. Yeah, he's back. Yes, we are trying
Yeah.
to, build a
Build a
product.
product.
There are a lot of unknowns. So it's a common major problem in, it was, I think, in the teams which were, evolving as an agile team, or who were waterfallish teams earlier, who were, following a set process earlier. Now they have suddenly, from past 1 decade or so, they have been tasked with, you become an agile team. Okay, so how do you become an agile team? You send some people to scrum master training for 2 days, and on Monday we are all, ready for the, you
Yeah.
know our agile sprint. No, that's not how it works, right? So we all need to understand our roles. So here, when we are saying that we don't have right requirements in place, I think it's the problem with the product owner or the BAs, whoever they're playing that hat. They need to bring in flavor of certain requirements in chunks. If not, backlog is never complete. We can never expect that backlog is a, it's a living document actually, or a living repository, which keeps on increasing with the new set of requirements. So it has to has a chunk of requirement which is, in an acceptable state, which development team agrees that they understand the acceptance criteria. It shouldn't be a very large set of requirement. It should be enough for, under team to, plan and explore their next 2 to 4 weeks of cycle. While we do that 2 to 4 weeks of cycle, we need to continue doing product backlog refinement sessions, which
Correct.
literally happens once or twice in a week. And when we reach our third sprint or the fourth sprint, whenever we planned it, we have more groomed backlog, right?
That's true.
So it is all about how you want to put discipline. It is not about testing here. I think it is more about the, team here. It is not about
Team.
product owner also. He might also not having any picture from the stakeholders, right? So we all need to work together here. We need to go back to the whiteboard again. We need to understand that what can we do in this, let's say, 2 weeks of the next 2 weeks. As a product owner, what do you feel? What should be our priority is, right? So do not plan for 6 months. Plan for chunks. Plan for shorter cycles. I think your problem should get solved.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That because it's so unknown at the moment that you can only plan for a smaller time, evaluate, retrospect quickly, and then move planning for the next smaller cycle. I think. So thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in this late and this from India, and of course so early from the other shore. And thank you, Param, for doing this.
Thank you all. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
See you next time.